Scott Gross.
Scott Gross, is that his name?
Scott is out in L.A.
I work fast and I'm a deal. I write and direct. Yeah, that guy's great.
But none of them understand that, like, Cleveland is a bombed out third world hellhole.
I go on and on.
Well, that was tremendous fun.
The cat hair apocalypse. Baby, it's like Mad Max, but with cats. Like
Cat
Apocalypse.
For being on some chill shit. Oh Lord, got a whole lot to show for it. I mean, we can really get it, we can go for it. Oh Lord, got a whole lot to show for it. I mean, we can really get it, we can go for it. Oh Lord.
Hypocrisy and nonsense.
It's a combination of stupidity, incompetence, preening, posturing, and fraud.
Hello, friends. In our last video, we talked about how comic book artists render chrome and other shiny surfaces. And towards the end of the video, as I got to more sophisticated examples like superhero armor or characters like Colossus, it occurred to me that a true understanding required a little bit more detail on how to render shadows, and core shadows in particular. So, before I do a Chrome Theory Part 2 video, where I show off some comic book examples of really chromed out characters, I thought, let's do a video on core shadows. And this also gives me a chance to look at one of the seminal books of my childhood, and something that should be in every comic book artist library, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. When I was a kid, this drawing of Captain America absolutely mystified me. I could not believe that a human being was capable of drawing this. And in particular, it was very definitely the work of one human being. Look, it's very clearly a pencil drawing. And every decision that's made here is very deliberate. So why, I asked my young self, is there a big black oval on Captain America's forehead? And it happens again later in the book. Here, kind of a rectangle. There's a big black rectangle on Captain America's forehead. And as you look to other Marvel Comics of that period, the situation would repeat itself. There was almost always a stylized black mass on the characters' foreheads. Little did I know that later in life I too would have a black rectangle on my forehead. But there was something to this at the time that confused me, and the truth is that I didn't fully understand it until much later in life. Living in Los Angeles, I took my mom to go see Dancing with the Stars. And at the show, the stage was lit with pink light from one side and blue light from the other side. And if you looked at the dancer's thighs, which I was, there was very clearly a dark line running down the center of the thigh. One side of the thigh was pink from the pink light. The other side of the thigh was blue from the blue light. But there was a dark line running down the center, and it occurred to me that that was the plane of the thigh that was facing us, the audience. We were in darkness. There was no light coming from the audience, and that's why it was dark, because it was an otherwise dark stage. To try to illustrate this, I've set up a little diorama. Here we have a cylinder which is being lit from one side by a pink light and from the other side by a blue light. And this is just like the dancer's thigh in my example. And this very simple example will be repeated over and over again in the comics that we're looking at. In any scenario where there is light coming from one side and the other side, but there's a dark plane in the middle facing the audience, that's the core shadow. I want you to look at this example and try to really comprehend it, because this is what it was for me that put over the idea of core shadow. Here's a classic Mike Zeck cover. Mike Zeck was another comic book artist who used core shadows very effectively to create drama and to emphasize the important parts of the drawing, make them pop out. Here the lighting is coming from one side of the gun barrel and the other side of the gun barrel, and there's very clearly a dark stripe in the middle, just like the dancer's thighs on Dancing with the Stars or the cylinder in our example. Here, I want to look at just the Marvel logo. Notice the character's face doesn't have a dark forehead, but he has a stylized dark mass there on the right side of his face. And that is the core shadow. Here is another great Mike Zeck illustration. It's more sophisticated than the cylinder. Here the core shadow is the character's core, but there is some plane of the musculature that is facing the audience. One side is lit by red, one side is lit by yellow, but Mike Zeck is able to identify that musculature that is facing us, the audience, and put that in black. One part is his knowledge of anatomy, and the other part is stylistic choices. And the stylistic choices you make in rendering your core shadows becomes part of the toolbox that determines your style as an artist. Let's look at an example that is a little bit simpler. Another one from Walt Simonson. And he is an artist that I look to a lot because, again, there's a deliberateness to what he does. Whether or not you like his stylistic choices, you can see very clearly why he's making the decisions he's making. This panel is not particularly significant to the story, but it's a good, simple example of core shadows. Here there's some kind of god or warlord preaching to his minions. He's on some elevated platform. He's got his weapons of war in his hand. And very clearly there is a plane of darkness that is facing the audience. I'm going to try to reproduce this. Let's try to understand what's going on. Here's another example where the musculature is not spot on, but it's very powerful and it's very effective. How did he do it? Here are two understandings that are imperfect, but they may work for you. We said that the dark stripe in the diorama or in the Dancing with the Stars example was because the audience was dark. There was no light coming from the audience. Imagine there was a light, though. Imagine there was a dark light coming from the audience, and that's what was painting the center of the dancer's thighs dark. This is the dark light. It's hitting that arm in the Walt Simonson comic, and these are the planes of the arm that it hits. And the planes that it doesn't hit straight on, the planes that it skirts to the side, we leave white. This is an imperfect understanding, but you kind of are getting the idea. If I was shining a black light that made things black at this arm, at this angle, what planes of the musculature would that light hit flush? And what planes would it just skirt off to the side? Here's another understanding that is imperfect, but I think can be effective. Imagine that there is a clear surface, a membrane, like the surface of a liquid, or even a fine sand, and we are pushing the arm into it. The elements of the musculature that we are going to make dark are the planes of the arm that hit that membrane flush, that membrane touches flush, as opposed to the planes that are, let's say, perpendicular to the membrane. These are the planes that it touches directly as it is being pushed into the surface. These are imperfect understandings, but this is how I try to think of what I'm doing when I'm looking at creating core shadows. All right, here's my god. Now, I pushed the figure a little bit. That's part of the fun of these type of exercises, is that you have a chance to see what the original artist did and really take it even further. I tried to capture those elements of the musculature, maybe even better or more effectively than Simonson, that were going to be kissed by that membrane as the figure recedes into the foreground, if it was to recede into the foreground. Or the elements of the black light, where would that black light shine? It would hit this side of the tricep, but not the top of the horseshoe. It would hit the back of the head, but not the top of the head. I'm trying to indicate a little lower back muscle here. That the choices that you make are statements. These are ideas. Here's the arm. My understanding of anatomy is no better than Simonson's. It doesn't really matter. It's effective because it's a clear and powerful statement of these planes. And if you make the statement very clearly and effectively and powerfully, then you're going to convey power and drama, and the fact that the musculature is a little off isn't going to bother anybody. Thank you very much, everybody, for the positive feedback that I got on my first video. I want to continue to do more of these and connect with all the young comic book artists out there. Please follow me at scottgross.works on Instagram and visit my website, scottgross.works. Hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the comments section, tell me about the comics that you love, some comics that you'd like to see me explore on the channel, or some examples of the concepts that I'm covering from comics that you have that you think are effective. Thank you very much, everybody, and happy drawing.